A decade ago, the night manager didn't just arrive quietly and disappear into the endless churn of television. It detonated. It was sleek, deliberate, and dangerous in a way that felt adult espionage, stripped of gadgets and bravado, replaced with wealth, access, and men who never needed to raise their voices because the world already belonged to them. It trusted its audience to understand that the most powerful villains don't hide in shadows. They host dinners. They fund charities. They smile for cameras. And then, just as importantly, it ended. No rushed continuation. No diluted follow-up. Just one immaculate season that walked away while its reputation was still untouchable. Which is exactly why Season 2 feels risky before a single scene even plays. Because returning after 10 years doesn't invite nostalgia. It invites scrutiny. It forces the show to answer a question it never had to before. Was the night manager special because of its moment? Or because of what it understood about power? Season 2 wastes no time answering that question. And it does so in the most unsettling way possible, by suggesting that nothing Jonathan Pine stopped actually stayed dead. We begin not with action, but with erasure. 4 years after the collapse of Richard Roper's empire, Jonathan Pine meets Angela Burr in Syria. There's no dramatic setup, no spy theatrics. Just two people sitting outside with coffee, speaking in the flat, careful language of professionals who have done terrible things for reasons they consider justified. Angela explains what will happen next. There will be no official autopsy, no photographs, no public confirmation of death. No ashes were returned to the family. Richard Roper will not be remembered as dead. He will simply stop existing. And Jonathan Pine, as far as the record is concerned, was never there. This is not justice. It's administration. At the morgue, Angela alone is allowed to identify the body. When she pulls back the sheet, we see Roper older, heavily bearded, unmistakably worn down by years of captivity before his death. The implication is clear. The world Roper helped create ultimately consumed him. But the show doesn't linger on satisfaction. Instead, it lingers on process. Because this is how systems deal with monsters, not by exposing them, but by managing the aftermath quietly, efficiently, and without witnesses. And that's the first warning sign of Season 2. Jonathan returns to London under a new identity. No longer a hotel night manager turned undercover operative, he now runs the Night Owls, a low-status MI6 surveillance unit, tasked with monitoring CCTV footage from London's most exclusive hotels. Jonathan still works nights, but now he watches instead of intervening. His job is to observe the ultra-wealthy, looking for patterns that might signal terror threats. It's unglamorous, thankless work, and Jonathan throws himself into it with the quiet intensity of someone who doesn't know how to stop. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't socialize. Even his therapist admits she's frightened of him, not because he's violent, but because he feels unreachable. This is a man who survived Roper physically, but never psychologically. Season 2 makes something clear immediately. Jonathan Pine did the right thing in Season 1, and the reward was a lifetime of unresolved trauma and institutional exile. His team reflects that marginalization. They're technically MI6, but physically and politically separated from headquarters at River House. They operate out of anonymous offices, spoken about dismissively by the higher-ups. They even have a nickname, the Night Owls. For a moment, the show almost feels like it's drifting toward slow horses territory, misfits, sidelined operatives, and bureaucratic contempt. But the night manager has a different destination in mind, because Jonathan sees something. On a surveillance feed, a face triggers recognition so immediate and visceral that his composure cracks. Jacko, one of Richard Roper's former enforcers, a man with a documented history of violence, a man who should not be operating freely. Jonathan doesn't need confirmation. He already understands the implication. Roper's network didn't collapse. It adapted. When Jonathan raises concerns, his boss Rex urges him to leave the past alone. It's framed as advice, but it sounds more like fear. Then Rex gives Jonathan a secret phone number, a private line meant only for emergencies. In espionage stories, this is never a gift. It's a contingency. And sure enough, Rex is soon found dead. Officially, it's ruled a suicide. Jonathan doesn't believe it for a second. Following the breadcrumbs Rex left behind, Jonathan discovers a hidden phone concealed beside a copy of The Trees of Old England. Certain pages are highlighted, numbers referenced, a code disguised as nostalgia. Inside the phone is a digital archive that confirms Jonathan's worst instincts, images of torture, gangland violence, Jacko smiling for the camera, and a man Jonathan doesn't recognize yet, Teddy Dos Santos. Across one image, scrawled in desperate clarity, is a question Rex never lived long enough to answer. Why is Mara in business with this man? This is the moment the show pivots, because Jonathan realizes the danger isn't coming from outside the system. It's already inside. Jonathan's investigation leads him to Teddy Dos Santos, CEO of Barquero, a shipping conglomerate with operations across the Americas. Teddy is charismatic, polished, and publicly generous. He runs a humanitarian charity called Aurora, positioning himself as a man who gives back. But buried inside Aurora's promotional material is something deeply unsettling. A recorded message from Richard Roper himself. Not archival footage. Not a news clip. A deliberate contribution. Roper didn't disappear. He prepared a successor. And Teddy isn't trying to replace him. He's trying to finish what Roper started, with better optics and fewer mistakes. This is where Season 2 clarifies its intent. The villain isn't a rogue anomaly. He's a product. A refinement. A version designed to survive modern scrutiny. Jonathan traces Rex's final contacts to Roxana Bolaños, a Colombian shipping broker operating out of Miami. She is essential to Barquero's logistics network, and therefore essential to Teddy's operation. Jonathan kidnaps her politely. That detail matters. There's no brutality, no threats of violence, just inevitability. She was always going to be taken. The only variable was how gently. Roxana insists she's trapped by Teddy, that she's under constant surveillance, that her cooperation isn't voluntary. But the show never frames her as helpless. She's cautious, calculated, always negotiating. Jonathan understands that whatever Roxana is, victim, accomplice, survivor, she's indispensable. The Night Owls follow Jacko to Barcelona. Despite repeated warnings that they are observers, not operatives, Jonathan pushes forward. He tags Jacko's briefcase and tracks him to a meeting with Teddy Dos Santos. This is where Jonathan makes his first real mistake of the season. He forgets who he's dealing with. Teddy doesn't run. He doesn't negotiate. He neutralizes. He shoots 2 members of Jonathan's team. He detonates the hotel. Jacko is killed, and Jonathan disappears in the explosion. Episode 1 ends in fire and ambiguity. Not because the show wants us to believe Jonathan is dead, but because something far more important has happened. Jonathan Pine, as he existed, is gone. Episode 2 opens in the aftermath. Jonathan survives. The Night Owls do not. Maria dismantles the unit, publicly reprimanding Sally and placing her on leave. Rex is buried, and Maria delivers a flawless tribute. The kind of speech that sounds sincere precisely because it avoids truth. Basil, another intelligence insider, begins to suspect that River House is compromised. He doesn't trust official channels. He trusts Jonathan. Together they do what Jonathan has always done best. They create a new identity. This time Jonathan becomes Matthew Ellis, a rogue financier from Hong Kong. Not a soldier. Not a spy. A capitalist. This is a crucial evolution. Season 1 infiltrated power through proximity. Season 2 infiltrates power through money. They manipulate events so Colombian authorities impound Teddy's latest shipment and freeze Barquero's accounts. A financial chokehold subtle, devastating. And into that vacuum steps Matthew Ellis. Jonathan enters Colombia and ingratiates himself with Teddy's lawyer, Juan Carrascala Mann, whose appetite for gambling makes him easy to read and easier to manipulate. Jonathan deliberately loses. He signals wealth without desperation. Eventually, Teddy introduces himself. Their conversations are measured, cautious, and layered with subtext. Teddy probes. Jonathan deflects. Neither man stops watching the other. Meanwhile, Sally works with Alejandro, a Colombian prosecutor who has pursued Teddy for years. Military interference blocks his investigation, confirming Teddy's reach extends far beyond criminal circles. Back in London, Basil begins spying on Maria, quietly building a case that the rot may go deeper than anyone wants to admit. Jonathan encounters Roxana again at a fundraiser. She doesn't expose him. Instead, she tells him the truth, or at least a version of it. She is trapped, but she wants out. Her terms are simple. When this ends, she walks free. No prosecution, no sacrifice. Jonathan threatens her. She counters with leverage, and they form an alliance built not on trust, but on mutual survival. Jonathan hires a private investigator to trace a woman from a photograph found in Teddy's wallet. The trail leads to a church where Teddy was raised. The woman is Teddy's mother. She had an affair with Richard Roper. She abandoned Teddy. Roper visited him once a year. This revelation reframes everything. Teddy isn't emulating Roper out of admiration. He's responding to him. Roper didn't just shape the arms trade. He shaped a child. And that child grew up learning that power, violence, and control were the only currencies that mattered. Sally discovers that 5 weapons shipments have already gone through. The impounded one may be the last chance to stop Teddy. Jonathan barely registers it, because he understands something far more terrifying. He isn't fighting a man, he's fighting a legacy. And he's one of the few people alive who truly understands how deep that legacy runs. Season 2 of The Night Manager isn't asking whether Jonathan Pine can stop Teddy Dos Santos. It's asking whether systems that profit from monsters can ever truly dismantle them. Richard Roper is dead, but everything he represented is very much alive. And Jonathan Pine may be the only person willing to burn himself down again to prove it.